Tyson, I'd like to start this out by reading something that was put out by the Department of Homeland Security. And I'm not very good at reading, but let me
Wonderful.
give it a try. At 9:05 a.m. Central Time, as DHS law enforcement officers were conducting a targeted operation in Minneapolis against an illegal alien wanted for violent assault, an individual approached U.S. Border Patrol officers with a 9mm semi-automatic handgun seen here. And then they put a stock photo of the gun that he was carrying. The officers attempted to disarm the suspect, but the armed suspect violently resisted. More details on the armed struggle are forthcoming. Fearing for his life and the lives and safety of fellow officers, an agent fired defensive shots. Medics on the scene immediately delivered medical aid to the subject, but was pronounced dead at the scene. The suspect also had 2 magazines and no ID. This looked like a situation where an individual wanted to do maximum damage and massacre law enforcement. About 200 rioters arrived at the scene and began to obstruct and assault law enforcement on the scene. Crowd control measures were deployed for the safety of the public and law enforcement. The situation is evolving, and more information is forthcoming. That's DHS a few minutes after Alex Pretti was shot in Minneapolis. What's your reaction?
Well, I mean, I guess it's better than Bovino's interview on CNN where he said that pepper spray was a form of de-escalation. Um,
Is that where he called Pretti a domestic terrorist?
uh, I
Because he
believe
has
so.
he
Yep.
has done that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He like hours after Renée Good was murdered as well. They called her a domestic terrorist. Everybody's a domestic terrorist now, apparently. But it's like if you actually know what happened, you can see the kernels of truth and what they're not saying. Like when they say that he approached them with a gun, that's a little bit spicier than them saying what actually happened, which is he approached them to film them, which is legal. He was exercising his First Amendment rights and happened to be legally carrying a firearm. And I also notice right at the end there when they say he had 2 magazines and no ID, which once again is that's supposed to be the body of evidence for saying that he was a potential mass shooter, right? And again, it's like when you actually lay out the facts that he was filming them, which he's legally allowed to do. He was carrying a gun and 2 magazines, which he was legally licensed to do. And he didn't have ID on him, which US citizens are not legally required to carry. So where was the suspicion, right? And Bovino was like he got pushed on CNN for this. I don't know whose image consulted to let him on CNN, but she basically just started pushing him with just the slightest nudge of scrutiny for any of these actions. And she's like, well, he was filming you. Why is that illegal? He's like, well, he was obstructing. It's like, we've seen the video. It didn't look like he was obstructing anything. It looked like he was filming you. It's like, well, he brought a gun to kill police officers. What's your evidence of that? Well, he had a gun. It's like, okay, so now having a gun on you that you're legally licensed to carry in the state is evidence that you're a dangerous person who's going to misuse that gun? You sure that's the stance you want to take, Republicans?
Somebody better not tell the open carry crazies who are walking around with 4 firearms, body armor, and helmets when they go to
I
the 7-Eleven.
Oh man, I said in this post, I said in a post yesterday, I was like, I never expected Republicans in the states to care when ICE was breaking the First, Fourth, and Fifth Amendments on a regular basis. I never in my life thought I would see Republicans coming for somebody for exercising their Second Amendment rights. That was not on my 2026 bingo card. Uh,
I'm sure you've looked at more angles of this shooting than is good for your mental health. I know I have, but it's becoming increasingly clear that the sequence of events is they approached him, they pepper sprayed him, they swarmed him. One agent, the guy in the gray sweatshirt, removes his firearm. The guy has both hands on the ground, and then he gets shot. And then people back up and empty their clips on him. That's almost undeniable. It is undeniable. There's so
Yes.
much footage of that exact sequence happening. And yet I'm still running into people going, he drew his gun. He was going for his gun. Pretty hard to go for a gun when both of your hands are planted on the ground.
Yeah. And you got about, what, 4 or 5 agents on
At
top of you?
least. Yeah.
I mean, it's like the audacity with which they're posting this stuff. Like I'm seeing, especially on Threads, there's like the Russian bots are having a field day on Threads, because I see the exact same wording copying pasted from different accounts with different profile pictures and everything, saying the video is clear. He drew his gun and tried to shoot the agents, and that's when they had to defend themselves by shooting him. We're all watching the same video. That's not what happened, right? You're the level of uh effort they're even putting into gaslighting now. They're just saying something that everybody who watches the video is not seeing, and yet they know that a significant number of people in the United States who are just diehard anti-immigration Trump supporters now are going to watch it, see exactly what we saw, and then pretend they didn't see it. Which is, it's one of several scary things about this situation. But it's crazy to me how easily they could excuse the shooting and killing of this man. I mean, the resistance. Like they're saying, oh, he violently resisted. Probably because he was worried they were about to do exactly what they did. And by the way, resisting arrest doesn't mean that you're a lethal threat to those officers. He didn't have his gun anymore. He wasn't attacking them. He was trying to get away. If you are following the bare minimum of use of force protocols, it's like, you don't shoot at a vehicle to stop it from running over you, because a corpse will still run over you. Somebody who's alive can press the brakes. You don't shoot somebody to stop them from trying to get up and run away. Worst case scenario, you let the dude run away. If he's a threat to you, if he's a threat to you, then he's not trying to run away. He's trying to attack. He wasn't trying to attack. He was trying to get up. Probably because he was worried they were about to do exactly what they did. That's why I imagine that's why Renée Good was turning the wheel to the right, trying to drive away, because she was getting yelled at by ICE officers to do conflicting things, which is, once again is indicative of the kind of training these guys are getting, where they're pointing tasers at people and say, "If you move, I'll tase you. Now get out of the car."
Yeah. The Renée Good parallels they're pretty significant, especially the spin that started immediately. As you recall, within a couple hours, Trump tweeted that the agent who had shot Renée Good had been very seriously injured and was in hospital and was lucky to survive.
Yeah, lucky to survive.
And yet we all saw video footage of him walking away, A, not getting struck, or perhaps getting brushed laterally, and then B, walking to his car while texting on his phone. That looks very, very, he must be in shock, because surely those serious injuries, that he could just maintain his texting through those very, very serious injuries.
It must have been an important text.
Yeah.
Right. It was the last text he was ever going to send. So it must have been an important one.
He just got a match on Grindr.
Jeez. Yeah, it's, I mean, and it's going to keep happening, because, and I don't know how much of a hot take this even is, because we're just, like, what I'm watching happen over and over again. I know it's going to keep happening, because I think it's the plan. I think it's the plan for this to keep happening. Because
if you had to guess, what is the plan?
The plan, I would say, is to flood the streets of cities that tends to lean a little bit more toward the liberal side of things. I won't say leftist because there really aren't many actual leftists in the United States. What they call a radical leftist anywhere else in the world would be the Conservative Party. But cities like Minneapolis that tend to vote Democrat, let's say, uh, are being flooded with ICE officers uh, who are poorly trained, easily agitated, and know full well that they can act with impunity and that they will not be held accountable by anybody in the chain of command, least of all the head of Department of Homeland Security, the head of ICE, or the President of the United States, who was
Yeah,
fully
I,
comfortable.
I agree. I just checked before we started recording here. The shooter for Renée Good, there was an FBI agent who was starting an investigation into him, and that investigation was quashed, and he's now been forced out of the FBI. So there's zero intent to investigate a police shooting, or not a police shooting, but a law enforcement in its largest sense shooting. And I've been peripherally involved with a couple of people who've had to go through. They were cops. They did have to shoot somebody. There was a massive investigation. It legitimately did destroy their lives. But you have to have that. If we give cops the right to pull a trigger and end your life without a judge, without a jury, without a sentencing, to unilaterally end your life, then the next step has to be a really thorough investigation. And it sucks for the cop who pulls the trigger, but that has to exist.
It
Otherwise,
has
you
to.
end up with rampant vigilantism on the part of the best armed and best protected, members of society. It sucks for the cop, but it has to happen. And now that was in a pretty unambiguous hostage taking scenario that I'm thinking back to. This now is a lesbian mom who writes poetry with stuffed toys in her glove box, trying to follow the instructions from one officer who's telling her to get out of here. That's not an unambiguous situation where somebody had to get shot. Of course, there has to be investigation. And what do you mean there hasn't been even the start of an investigation 2 weeks later? That's insanity.
Yeah, and like I say, it's the plan. It's the plan to have this happen over and over and over again because they want to be able to frame Democrats and Democratic voters as violent insurrectionists that pose a threat to the sovereignty and security of the United States and need to have their cities occupied by federal troops in order to keep the peace and maintain law and order. That's the game. And it's crazy to watch this playing out the way that it has because you get you get these people who not just idolize but fetishize the founding fathers, fetishize the Revolutionary War, fetishize the mythology of the United States of America and how it was founded. Yet they are cheering as a federally controlled force against the expressed intent and without the consent of the governor of a state, occupying that state and regularly, daily violating the First and Fourth and Fifth Amendments of the Constitution. And they are conducting themselves as if they can act with impunity because they know they can, because of the massive amount of power that has been concentrated in the executive of the United States, completely unchecked by the judicial branch and the legislative branch, which are the representatives actually elected by the people. This right now that we're seeing was the founding fathers' worst fears. Their worst fear was exactly what we're seeing now. There were founding fathers, there were anti-federalist founding fathers that didn't even think there should be an executive or if there was an executive, it should be a few people, not just one person, because they feared exactly this, that too much power could be concentrated in the executive, unchecked by the two other branches of government, and that they would occupy a state with federal forces, just like King George had done. And all the Republicans now that are cheering for this, they would have been loyalists. They love the founding fathers. They love the Revolutionary War. They would have been the loyalists. They would have been the ones telling Sam Adams, "Hey, why don't you just comply? This King George, he's just trying to maintain law and order. I don't know why you just didn't comply." All right.
It's also amazing how many World War II fans are supporting the current U.S. administration. They seem to be fixated on Messerschmitt airplanes and Tiger tanks and T-34s fight, like I mean, it was terrible for the people, but it's kind of cool to be comparing these military technologies and completely ignoring the Nazi rise to power in the 1930s, essentially.
Well,
And
that's
the parallels are just astounding. Like I was thinking about this the other day. After World War I, there were these large paramilitary organizations called the Freikorps, basically the Free Corps. And those eventually got subsumed into the SA, the brown shirts. And after the Night of the Long Knives, and a lot of those got subsumed into the SS. So you basically had independent militias that were well armed and well trained, and young aggressive men who were extremely disillusioned. Basically the Proud Boys, basically the Oath Keepers, getting subsumed into a militia that was controlled by the government. And the SS was initially a bodyguard for Hitler, but then it had tremendous amounts of money thrown at it, and now you had the SS metastasized into something gigantic. The Proud Boy to ICE, or the Proud Boy to Department of Homeland to DHS arc is so well established at this point, it's insane. And
well, not only that, but they have tweaked the system to make it almost impossible for those people to get weeded out as applicants, because this has been somewhat sensationalized. Like, there was a number being thrown around, like, oh, their training's been reduced to 47 days because Donald Trump's the 47th president. Like, there's actually not much evidence to substantiate that. What we do know is that the minimum age has been lowered from 21 to 18 to join ICE. We know that the maximum age requirement of 40 has been removed. We know that the training, which used to be around 500-ish hours, which already wasn't enough. We could talk about that in a second, but what used to be about 500 hours of training has been reduced to about 8 weeks of training, which, assuming the same rough number of hours per week, is about 300 hours of training. And they have been letting people through the cracks to actually enlist and move on the application process, as far as being trained, who have failed background checks, who have failed drug tests. There was one journalist who, as an experiment, tried enlisting for ICE, knowing full well that they had a criminal background that should be disqualifying under Department of Homeland Security's protocols, and also that the drug test would come back positive for marijuana, which is also supposed to be disqualifying. So they enlisted knowing that they should be told no, and they were told yes. So we have people failing open book exams. We have people showing up and not even being able to demonstrate the barest minimum of fitness. We have people failing drug tests. We have people lying about their backgrounds. ICE was trying to actively recruit people who had law enforcement experience, and there were many people who lied about having law enforcement experience and got as far as training before they admitted voluntarily that they had no law enforcement experience. All right. So if they had said anything, then nobody ever would have known. So we have a situation where
not to
they are
mention any
not
January
vetting
6th.
applicants. Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, where else would those guys go? I mean, you've basically given them a place to go where they can act out their fantasy of fighting in Donald Trump's holy race war and get a nice tidy government salary and 50K bonus, which I've heard some weird stuff about that 50K bonus, about how many of them actually aren't going to get it. I haven't actually looked into that in detail, but they're advertising that you can get a $50,000 signing bonus in a country that says it can't afford healthcare. Right. So this is to somebody like me who actually like part of my work is teaching de-escalation and humane subdue and arrest techniques. I spent 5 years developing specific contextual Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu techniques for weapon retention and weapons defense and subdue and arrest and all these different things that could sort of be plugged and played. And I could customize them to suit different use of force requirements or different weapon systems or based on the day-to-day of what they would actually be most likely to deal with, all that stuff. And while I was developing that, I was also researching the statistics on use of force and, how many officers get killed and how many officers kill people based on what country they live in and what kind of use of force requirements they are. I mean, the United States police officers are killing people at 33 times the rate that police officers in the UK kill people. It's 33 times the rate at which police officers kill people in the UK. In the UK, the police officers don't carry guns. And the line we get from conservatives here is that, well, if you take away the cops' guns, then there's no deterrent and criminals are just going to do whatever they want. That's not the case. The UK also has far lower rates of violent crime than the United States does. Why? Because they have 100 required hours of de-escalation training. They have other tools other than lethal force, and they have to emphasize those. So we have a situation where like I'm looking at this from the perspective of somebody who teaches this stuff, and like I look at the 1,200 hours of standard training that a police officer in the United States gets, and then the 600 hours of on the job training that they have to do after that to be considered to be qualified to do the job, and how often they are drawing their guns unnecessarily because they don't have the skills to handle those in between situations. And how even a tiny little bit of de-escalation training can reduce use of force incidents by 28%. And I'm looking at this and I'm looking at, okay, well, police officers in the States with 1,800 hours of training have all these problems. ICE had a third of that, 500-ish hours. And the proof is in the results. They had far more use of force incidents per capita per incident than normal police officers on average have in the United States. And now they've reduced that and removed any standard of applicants that they may have had before.
I think
Like
most of the things you've said are undeniable and are well documented.
Yeah.
So we've got a bunch of very often extremely incompetent, uh, demonstrably violent people picking up being granted with a huge arsenal and essentially immunity from their consequences of their action.
Yes.
And it's the opposite of de-escalation. It's escalation. The lack of de-escalation is not a bug; it's a feature.
Yeah.
And I'm going to guess
putting them on
that
the
you're
street
saying
like
that this is part of the plan.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is why I think it's the plan, because putting them on the street like that, as unprepared as they are, is escalation. Because I could put to the side the fact that there's a certain percentage of these people who are, like I say, they joined ICE because they're racist, right? Let's just say that's not the case. Let's say that this person is not an inherently violent person, that they are not inherently racist, that they truly believe in the stated purpose of ICE. Okay, let's say that as a hypothetical. Okay, that this is a well-meaning person. It's still incredibly dangerous to have that person on the street right now. Why? Because we've all sort of agreed as a society that if a police officer is put in a situation where it is their life or the subject's life, that they choose their life. right? That a police officer has the right to defend themselves using lethal force against lethal force, right? We've all sort of agreed that that's, a tragic but necessary circumstance for police officers. However, when do you fear for your life, right? Because that's a subjective thing. If somebody is in better physical condition versus worse physical condition, somebody who is in better physical condition, it's going to be a higher bar for them to fear for their life than somebody who's in poor condition. If someone has had de-escalation training, so they have some tools to use in a person who is not necessarily attacking them yet, not necessarily violent, but is uncooperative. They have some de-escalation training. They have a tool they can use that isn't a gun in that situation. When they fear for their lives, the bar rises. If they have unarmed combat training, the ability to subdue and arrest someone without shooting them first, and they have done hours of training and preparation and pressure testing and training and all the things that come along with that, the confidence that you've handled this situation before and you know how to do it, the bar for when your life is feeling threatened goes up, 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 up. And the opposite is true as well. So if you are putting people on the street who are supposed to be arresting people, and they have been empowered to use lethal force if they feel their life is threatened, but they are in poor physical condition, they don't understand use of force, they don't understand procedural law, they have no training to be able to non-violently arrest or subdue or arrest somebody, there is no margin for that person between when the person is fully cooperative and just does what you tell them and when the person does not. As soon as the person is uncooperative, that person fears for their life. And out comes
Tyson,
the
they
gun.
should just comply. If they just complied, then they wouldn't get shot. I'm being told reliably by pundits on the internet that if you don't comply, then you deserve to get shot.
Of course. Yeah. It's why don't you just comply? Says the people with all the "Don't Tread on Me" flags in their garages. It's like all those guys should be required to just trade in their flags for one that says "Tread on me harder, daddy," because that's all they're saying right now. All these guys have they basically been exposed as not caring about democracy, not caring about law and order, not caring about the rule of law, not caring about the Constitution. Like, they are perfectly happy with a dictator as long as it is their preferred dictator. So I was like you and I were talking before. I really do think that there is a case for criminal negligence for the people who are putting these people on the street right now, knowing full well that they are unprepared to handle these situations non-violently that they are getting into as part of their job.
So
Putting
the
those
more
people on the street as unprepared as they are itself is a violent act.
I don't disagree at all. The offering of unconditional immunity or the promising of unconditional immunity and a million other things help stoke these flames. Another shooting is inevitable, if not a full-on Kent State style shooting, which happened, I think, in 1970 when the U.S. expanded its war into Cambodia, from Vietnam to Cambodia. There were massive protests, and something north of 20 people got shot and 4 or 5 people got killed. But what happens then? I say the Minnesota National Guard gets mobilized, which is already possibly in motion. And now we end up with the 82nd Airborne facing off against the Minnesota National Guard, and that's a nightmare scenario.
Yeah. Last I'd heard, Tim Walz had activated the National Guard. And like I used to think that there was some kind of bottom for like where, like how far they would be willing to take this. And in Trump's first term, I think there would have been. I think in Trump's first term, as narcissistic and unintelligent and morally bankrupt as he is, as impulsive as he is, as emotionally driven as he is, I think in his first term, there were still some people kicking around in the administration that would have been like, "Sir, we can't. We can't invoke the Insurrection Act and send 1,500 US military personnel to attack civilians in Minneapolis. We just can't. We can't do it." Right? There were so many people in his first term that basically saw it as their duty to their country to handle Donald Trump. Like, there's so many reports of people who worked at his White House where he would, like, say, "Hey, I want this done," and write down on a piece of paper, and they would, like, basically just tell him they were gonna do it and then just never do it, and he would forget about it. But, like, if they'd actually followed his directive, it would have been this horrific constitutional crisis. There were so many people like that in his first term around him that were at least willing to be, the last branch that American democracy could grab before it hit the ground. Those people are no longer there. He has successfully in his second term surrounded himself with people who are either just as unintelligent as he is or too corrupt to tell him anything he doesn't want to hear. And I really do think that we could see this going as badly as him usurping Tim Walz as governor, having Tim Walz arrested and removed as governor, based on some kind of trumped up charge. Forgive the pun of like, oh, he's
A domestic terrorist. Done.
yeah, I could see him accusing Tim Walz of sedition or treason against the United States for inciting riots against law enforcement officers that are just doing their jobs and arresting Tim Walz, a former vice presidential candidate. I could see that happening.
Okay, so why?
That a guy like Stephen Miller is chomping at the bit to do that right now.
So why? Now I think we're entering conspiracy theory country. Like there's various theories as to why this escalation is being pushed and pushed and pushed. There are theories out there saying that it's to nullify Minnesota's vote in the midterms. There's accounts of Kristi Noem wanting to make ICE being withdrawn from Minnesota conditional on getting the voter rolls from Minnesota. I'm a very slow convert on this. I don't think it's entirely impossible that this is about distracting from the Epstein Files, which, as you and I both know, were supposed to be released in full, redacted only to protect the identity of the victims on December 19th. We're now a month past that. It hasn't happened. There have been zero consequences. Is this all to protect a pedophile rapist in the White House? It
Yeah.
might be.
Well, I mean, you're familiar with Occam's razor? Well, it's like a lot of listeners may be familiar with the term Occam's razor, and it's often sort of quoted as like the simplest answer is usually the right one. It's not quite that simple. It's Occam's razor is if there are multiple possibilities that are all ostensibly as likely, the one that is most likely is the one that requires the least assumption. So, if you were to look at the possibilities, well, Donald Trump claims that there's there's nothing about him in the Epstein files, and that he's totally innocent, and that the Epstein files have no mention of anything that he's ever done wrong, and that it's all Democrats, and that it is the Epstein files are a hoax, and if they're not a hoax, then they're full of Democrats. Right? He's said both of those things before.
And that he would release them, and that he wouldn't release them.
Yeah.
And that he wishes Ghislaine Maxwell well.
Yeah, and that there are no Epstein files, or that they were on her desk, but she didn't really mean that the files were on her desk, that there was something else. Like if you look at the possibility that requires the least assumption, it would be that the Republicans are fighting tooth and nail to delay or prevent the release of the Epstein files because they don't like what's in them. Like, if it's true that the files are a Democrat hoax, why did you say you'd release them? If it's true that the Epstein files are real, but that it's all Democrats, why wouldn't you release them? Why wouldn't you be posting them on every single media outlet in the universe if you really thought it wasn't going to hurt Donald Trump and it was only going to hurt Democrats? If it was only going to hurt Democrats, why did Donald Trump say that releasing the Epstein files, that voting to release the Epstein files would be a violent act against his administration? Like, I got to say, the possibility with by far the least assumptions that you have to make is that Donald Trump doesn't like what's in the Epstein files and he doesn't want people to see them. That's not making a whole lot of assumptions. I mean, they're going so far to try to prep for this eventual release of the files by saying things like, "Oh, it must have been a different Donald Trump." Pam Bondi literally said, like, "Oh, it's probably just like another Donald Trump that Jeffrey Epstein was talking about," even though we know that they were best friends for like 15 years. It's like, oh, it was another Donald Trump he was talking about. It's such a common name.
I don't know how many MAGA supporters are listening or watching right now, but to the one who is and is yelling, "What about Bill Clinton?" or "What about Bill Gates?" or "What about Noam Chomsky?" What say you?
Get him. I'm going to say the exact same thing that every Democrat and every real leftist I've ever spoken to has said, which is get them all. No one on the left gives a shit if Bill Clinton goes to jail. We don't. So this is, as far as I'm concerned, this is just projection. They wouldn't care if their guy is in the Epstein files. So they think that Democrats won't care if their guy's in the Epstein files. They're trying to equivocate the idea that, oh, well, nobody's talking about Bill Clinton. Who gives a shit? Every time somebody says that, I say, show me one Democrat who is complaining about and trying to protect Bill Clinton. You can't. Show me one leftist that doesn't want the files released because there might be Democrats in it. Get them all. That's what every single person, both center-right liberal like the Democrats or actual leftists, has been saying from the beginning. If there are people implicated in crimes against children in these documents, every single one of them should be prosecuted and held to account for that. Every single one of them. Right? It's
There are
very simple
potentially
for us.
people.
Right?
There are potentially people that would hurt. There are potentially people that I would really not like to actually be in the Epstein files. Like Noam Chomsky is a good example. There was one allegation that he'd made the trip to Epstein Island. I don't know if it's true, but because I really like Noam Chomsky. But if he went, then investigate him. If there's evidence, then prosecute him. If there's
Absolutely.
sufficient evidence to find him guilty, then lock him up for the rest of his life. And it doesn't matter how Stephan Kesting cares about him and that Stephan Kesting would feel sad. Fuck it. Lock him up.
Absolutely. There's no one on earth who is smart enough or cool enough or useful enough that I don't think they should go to crime, that I don't think they should be held to account for harming children. I mean, this is very simple for me. I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's simple. I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with the Conor McGregor sexual assault case. But I used to have a Conor McGregor quote up on my wall at my dojo. It was his precision beats power and timing beats speed. Cool quote. Very true. Very insightful. And the second I heard about all this horrible stuff that he's done and especially when I heard about the court case, I took it down immediately. Not because the quote's any less cool now, not because he's any less talented a martial artist now, but because there are some things that you can't compartmentalize. I don't want that kind of person's name on my wall at my dojo. And all my students noticed, right? And it was a good opportunity to have some age appropriate, of course, conversations about, you know what, some people uh you like and admire them for certain qualities or certain abilities or certain aspects of their personality, but then you find out that they're not who you thought they were, and you have a choice. You can either compartmentalize and say, I'm still a fan of him as a martial artist, so I'm just gonna keep being a fan of him, and if anybody asks, I'm just gonna say, yeah, I don't like that stuff, but I still think he's cool because he's a fighter.
Mm.
No, I can find other martial artists to admire that aren't rapists. There's lots of them.
Yeah. So to drag this back to the shit show in Minnesota, if it's not the Epstein file, then what is it? Or what is it in addition to the Epstein files, if you had to guess? And again, we're speculating here.
Yeah.
Is this part
I
of implementing Project 2025, which certainly Stephen Miller is in charge of for all intents and purposes?
yeah. I think it's about canceling midterms. I think that they have been systematically um pushing boundaries to see how far they can go without upsetting their base of support. I think that they have been pushing the limits of executive overreach. They have been pushing the limits of judicial interference. They have been pushing the limits of like basically they've been playing chicken with every sort of protocol and etiquette and handshake agreement or jurisprudence when it comes to how the American government is supposed to work. Um, I did a long post about this after Trump's first term, which I really thought at the time was going to be his last term, where I was like, we have to be thankful to Donald Trump for one thing, and that is that he exposed the American system of government as a series of handshake agreements with no real enforcement mechanism. That's a problem that we should have known about, and now we know about it, right? Before Donald Trump, because there was somebody who was supposed to, who was subpoenaed by Congress to go and testify about the Ukraine scandal that he was impeached for, and he basically just told the guy, "Don't go," and the guy didn't go, and he was censured, and then nothing else happened. There's like in the entire history of the United States, nobody ever would have even tried that because they would have assumed, well, surely you can't just say no when Congress subpoenas you. Surely you can't. There must be some sort of enforcement mechanism where you would get into real trouble for that. Turns out, nope. You get somebody like Donald Trump who's just willing to die on every hill and willing to play chicken with everything, with every single situation, and he never swerves. And all of a sudden, all these things are, well, we could lead this guy out in handcuffs, but we've made a decision that it's better for democracy if we don't. He basically just shot it all to shit. He exposed the whole thing as just a series of etiquettes and handshake agreements and just sort of social contracts of how things are supposed to go. And he basically just blew it all up and said, if you want me to do anything I don't want to do, you have to arrest me. You have to lead the president of the United States out of here in handcuffs. And if you're not willing to do that, nothing short of that is going to compel me to do anything. So they've just been systematically pushing these boundaries. Like, can I just say on Fox News that I'm instructing the Supreme Court to do this, and then they do it? Nobody ever would have thought to do that, but he did it. And then it happened, and then there was no repercussions. So I think the game is for them under the guise of national security to cancel the midterms. I think that they'll try to make up I think that they're trying to incite enough violence that they could say, we can't have midterms because we're going to post federal officers outside of these voting stations to ensure election security and election integrity. And we're worried that these radical leftist rioters are going to attack them or try to do something at the election booth. So we're just not going to have midterms. Like, I think that's what they're going for. I think that they're going to try to I don't think they're going to try to let the election happen and then contest the results, because that didn't work last time. I think that they're just going to skip straight to try to cancel the midterm elections completely, or maybe they'll like let it happen, but then try to have some kind of security risk that pops up in the middle of it, so that like the results aren't counted properly because voting stations have to be closed because of security threats. And like, I mean, they're basically playing out like the third or fourth season of House of Cards in real time.
Yeah.
Like, it's I think that's the game. I think that they know the midterms are likely to be a brutal defeat for most Republicans, and they're trying to I think they're trying to lay the groundwork for saying that it's too dangerous to hold midterm elections.
And they're already
keep
laying the groundwork for going beyond Minnesota. Like recently, in the last few days, my feed has been overrun by the right-wing people and the libertarians. Basically, right-wing people who don't want to use the term right-wing, saying things like, well,
centrists,
the Somali,
common sense centrists.
common sense centrists,
Oh, you
who
fucking
just happen
cowards.
to align with every speaking point on Fox News ever,
Yeah.
are beginning to say things like, well, there was this Somali fraud in Minnesota, but wait till we get to California. Oh my God, it's so much worse there. There's a non-zero chance that the next place that the 82nd Airborne is going to be deployed to install martial law after a DHS triggered riot goes bad is Los Angeles or San Francisco or San Diego. California is probably next, if I had to guess.
I mean, Gavin Newsom seems really confident that he can handle that somehow, because he's out of everybody in the American political system, Gavin Newsom has really been the only one saying what we're all thinking. But just like when he's acting like a petulant child, call him a petulant child. When he's lying, say he's lying, right? Very few other Democrats have been willing to be as forthright with what's happening and who Donald Trump is and why he's so dangerous as Gavin Newsom. And I don't think he would do that if he thought it was going to result in something terrible happening to his state. So whether or not he actually is prepared for it, he clearly thinks he's prepared for it. So
in the showdown
here's
between the
hoping.
U.S. Army and on one side, and ICE and DHS on one side, and the California National Guard, and let's just say every police department in California, that's not a contest. There's zero chance that California wins that military deployment. And Donald Trump has already proven he's basically willing to burn the world to the ground to get what he wants. Like,
Because he knows he'll be dead before he actually faces any consequences for it.
And
that's why he's trying to build stone arches and rename buildings and shit, because at this point in his life, he's concerned with one thing and one thing only, and that's his legacy. So he won't be around to see the decades of fallout from this. He'll be dead. And he knows that he'll be succeeded by people who will continue the proud Trump tradition of blaming everyone but Donald Trump and making sure that the history books are as friendly to him as possible.
What happens after Donald Trump? Let's say he drops dead from a clot next month. What happens? Because obviously the Project 2025 guys, the Heritage Foundation, J.D. Vance, Stephen Miller, Peter Thiel, they realize this guy is on borrowed time. So they have to have a plan. And J.D. Vance, say it's him, is incredibly unpopular on both sides. But it doesn't matter if he's unpopular if you've canceled the midterms and then you cancel the elections. And
Yeah,
because you've got
it's
an actual civil war, a shooting match between, like I said, the 82nd Airborne and the California National Guard.
yeah. I mean, the idea that it would get that far and the military establishment wouldn't have the power or willingness to put the brakes on it and say, hey, these are legal orders. Those are Americans over there. We don't have the legal grounds for this. We don't have the constitutional grounds for this. We will not carry out this order. It That's what should happen. I don't know if that's what's going to happen. That's why they've set Pete Hegseth to clean out the Pentagon of every single upper echelon military personnel that might stand up to anything Trump wants them to do. Right? That's, under the guise of DEI and de-wokeization and all these taglines.
Perfect form kettlebell swings.
Yeah, exactly. That's like that's what they sent Pete Hegseth to do. They sent Pete Hegseth in there to clear out everyone with a conscience, everyone with real qualifications, everyone with real tenure, everyone who was respectable enough that if Donald Trump said one thing and this general said another thing, the army would listen to the general. They don't want anyone like that around in the Pentagon. So that's what Hegseth's real job is. On the surface,
they were around for the first administration, as you mentioned. There was somebody who talked about of nuking a hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah, and who knows what else he rambled on? Like, who else knows what orders he actually gave that people just forgot on the way to the Pentagon and never told him about? Like all the people, like, we're not even joking anymore when we say, tell him we got Greenland. Just tell him we got it. Take a picture in the snow in Colorado somewhere with an American flag and say it's Greenland and just tell Trump we got it. He won't know the difference. Like, yeah. They're talking about him
then he'll move on to Canada. Then he'll move on to getting Canada, which honestly we can touch on, but we shouldn't, because I'm going to get you back on another episode, hopefully with some of the other compatriots here on Fighting Matters, to talk about this idea of the United States annexing Canada or parts of Canada and the various Alberta separation movements. I think we have to have that as a separate conversation. And so we'll do that in the weeks to come. But yeah, if you tell me you got Greenland, there's a non-zero chance the motherfucker goes, oh, cool, we got Venezuela. We got Greenland. What's next? Panama? Flip a coin? Canada. Heads, it's Canada. Tails, it's Panama. Either way, we're going to, send Delta Force to kidnap Mark Carney because he made fun of us at Davos.
Good Lord. I like the amount of like the amount of conservative backlash against Mark Carney right now for what happened in Davos, for like his speech basically announcing the end of American empire.
Okay. For the people who've not heard it, could you summarize Davos? For the people who watched it know what happened. They're probably going to enjoy it. And the people who didn't hear it, I honestly, I would have a certain amount of perverse enjoyment of you who thinks that Mark Carney is pretty far to the right, having to talk about what Mark Carney did at Davos, because I think it was actually necessary and on the whole good.
Well, I mean, it's like I think the contrast between him and Trump, like the speeches they gave, is really the most telling part, because people think people on the right, both here in Canada and in the United States, think that Mark Carney was like selling out the United States and pandering to China. And they think that Donald Trump was standing up to the globalist criminals in the WEF, and that he was making some kind of stand against these radical leftists that are trying to hand the world over to China and Russia. And basically, all Mark Hardy had to do was point out what everyone already knows, that the world as it exists right now isn't the world of the 1960s, where whoever had the most nukes and the most willingness to use them was the person who called all the shots for international diplomacy. What matters now is soft power, right? Your ability to affect the affairs of other nations because they want to work with you and they understand, they see value in being associated with you. And also the fact that we are so globally integrated now that if you alienate your own allies, you're not just alienating your own allies militarily, you're alienating your allies economically, and you are making the entire world a less safe place the more dangerous you make it to be an American. And it's really hard to understate, like you say, how far to the right Mark Hardy is. He for this is one of the most frustrating things, being if you're an American or a Canadian that understands anything about leftist politics or leftist ideology. You know that there are no leftist parties that have ever been in power at the federal level in the United States or Canada. And that's a fact. Like the Liberal Party of Canada is center right, and the Conservatives in Canada are on the right. The Democrats in the States are on center right at best. They'd be the Conservative Party in any other country on earth. And the Republicans have just lost their minds. They're sliding so far to the right so fast that that just acknowledging that we shouldn't have federal officers murdering people in the street as cold blood is like a communist ideology now. It's like for the listeners, just to give you a really clear indication of what a leftist is. If you think somebody's a leftist, ask yourself this question. Does this person think that there are any circumstances under which it's acceptable for someone to be a billionaire? If this person believes there are any circumstances under which it's acceptable for one human being to have $1 billion, they're not a leftist. And considering how many billionaires support the Liberal Party of Canada and how many billionaires support the Democratic Party in the United States, that should give you a very clear indication of where they sit politically. But it's so frustrating watching conservatives here in Canada say, "Oh, we're selling out the United States." Like this is what you do when you get pressured from your ally and main training partner. It's like, oh, okay. That's a weird way to describe pressure, threatening to annex us, imposing tariffs on his own people that cripple entire industries on both sides of the border because of a fake fentanyl crisis. Like, it's.
Well, it'd be nice to know that at last news cycle, there was a 100% tariff coming against Canada because of Canada's trade deal with China. Okay, cool. The presidential right to impose tariffs is for emergencies, in emergencies.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So I'd like to know if this is from the fentanyl emergency, which is like, 40 pounds of fentanyl a year, or if this is because of the immigrant emergency, the few hundred
we're being
illegal
invaded.
immigrants coming from, please let us know which emergency this is. But the reality is, nobody's even pretending anymore.
No, this is the
It's
same
the president.
government.
He can just do whatever the fuck he wants.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, that's a great example of what I was talking about before, where they've just been systematically pushing boundaries to see what they can get away with, and the answers are terrifying because Congress is the only entity of the American government that is given the power by the Constitution to impose tariffs. And through jurisprudence over the decades, the president, Congress has loaned the powers of imposing tariffs to the president under certain circumstances, immediate threats to the sovereignty and security of the United States. And every single time Donald Trump even threatens to place a tariff on a sovereign nation as a punitive measure for something he didn't like. I mean, he threatened Brazil with tariffs because they were because of Bolsonaro's court case. Because Brazil, a sovereign nation, their judicial system was holding someone accountable who had been accused of very serious crimes. Donald Trump says, I don't like that you're doing that. I think Bolsonaro's innocent. I don't think that you're treating him fairly. I'm going to put tariffs on your country. There is no legal ground for that whatsoever. And that should have been the kind of thing where Congress would step in and reassert that the Constitution gives us, not you, the power to impose tariffs, and you are abusing that power, so we are going to reassert our exclusive constitutional power to impose tariffs, and from now on, any tariff has to go through Congress. That would have been the opportunity for them to do that, but they didn't, and they probably won't. I mean, this is a president who, basically removed the president of Venezuela without Congress even knowing. I mean, the Congress found out the same way we all did on the news the next day. And you've got Republicans claiming, oh, this wasn't an act of war. How is this? I saw so many comparisons to Osama bin Laden. How is removing Maduro any different than Barack Obama having Osama bin Laden killed? Authorized use of military force? Like literally what we're talking about. Congress approved that. Congress didn't approve this. And in Venezuela, in the case of Venezuela, they said it was about cocaine, which is hilarious. I mean, Venezuela is not even one of the countries that is, I don't even think Venezuela makes the top 5 of countries that are known for exporting illicit drugs in the United States. And they also said it was about the fact that he was an illegitimate leader that he had stolen the last election, which there's some pretty convincing evidence that there was some pretty shady stuff going on with the last election. But if it's about that, then
Putin better
why
watch
did you?
out.
Well, sorry.
Then Putin better watch out.
Well, not only that, but if you're going to make the claim that Maduro is not a legitimate leader of Venezuela, which, okay, fair enough, that's been your government's official position since 2024, that the opposition is the actual legitimate leader of Venezuela, then why did you remove Maduro but leave the rest of his administration intact? Right? You're saying that they stole the election. Okay, so you remove the president who stole the election, but every single other person that stole the election with him is still there. His vice president assumed power. They have said that they have not said that there's going to be any transition of power from the vice president who you claim stole the election along with Maduro, and facilitating a transition of power to the opposition, which you have claimed since August of 2024 is the rightful party, the rightful leaders of Venezuela. If you're going to say this is about election interference, then why haven't you removed everyone else who stole the election? I mean, the vice president, Delcy Rodriguez, I think her name is, she assumed power and immediately denounced the removal of Maduro as a kidnapping. She declared a state of emergency, and she has the police looking for the people within her government who sold out Maduro and might have helped the United States with the operation. that doesn't sound like you're interested in restoring the leadership of Venezuela to the rightful leaders of Venezuela. And then even with the oil, it's like he has all the moral bankruptcy for corporate colonialism, but he's not competent enough to even do it right, because none of these oil companies are lining up to spend the hundreds of billions of dollars over the next 10 years to get Venezuela's oil industry up and running like he claimed they were going to. Like he literally removed the president of a sovereign nation, assuming that all these oil companies were going to step in and take over the oil industry and start pumping oil, and he didn't even talk to them. I mean, all these guys are saying that Venezuela is uninvestable because oil companies don't care about working with dictators, but they want to know it's going to be the same dictator tomorrow. That's what oil companies care about.
Unless this was never really about oil, unless this takes us back to our Occam's razor determined thing that it was mostly an attempt to dominate the news cycle, right? We got to remember that the Venezuela operation happened something like a week after the Epstein Files were supposed to be released and had not been, and that was beginning to make news. And next thing you know, you had every right-wing fanboy creaming themselves over the incredible military operation, which it was, to take out Maduro. And, like, oh, sonic weapons, oh, zero casualties, oh, amazing, amazing, oh. And nobody's saying, wait a second, what was supposed to happen last week? So if that's the case, then it was a massive success for its main stated purpose. And who gives a shit about whether oil companies invest or not? Who gives a shit whether the vice president becomes a new president? The entire bloody illegitimately elected government is still in place.
Yeah, I mean, and like, I mean, Venezuela is going to be such a dumpster fire in the years to come because, like, because President Trump is making the case that this was a law enforcement action and therefore not an act of war, so he didn't need congressional approval. But when you do that, there's a time limit on it. You're only supposed to be able to extend an operation of any kind of military operation for 60 days without congressional approval. So if he gets oil companies willing to try to rebuild the oil industry in Venezuela, it's not going to be American troops on the ground ensuring their security. It's going to be private military contractors. So the way I see Venezuela going in the near future, because there was no thought put into what would actually happen at all, really. I think, I mean, maybe it's a distraction from the Epstein Files. I think it's even simpler than that. I think Donald Trump wants to feel like a real man, and ordering big tough soldiers to go do big tough soldier things makes him feel like a big tough soldier. Like anything for him to try to feel like a real man and just throw praise and validation into the dark abyss inside him where Fred's love should have been. I think most of what he does is really powered by that more than anything else.
So two questions, and they're related. How do Americans stop this? Are there scenarios in which this insane clown circus can be stopped from within? And what does the world do to separate itself and to insulate itself from this insane clown posse as well? So those are two questions, and they're pretty big questions.
Yeah, I mean, the truth of the matter is that the biggest threat to global security right now is the United States. I think it's without question. I mean,
Make the case for that, because people are going to say Russia, people are going to say China, people are going to say leftist Antifa terrorists for traveling the world.
Of course, right? And it's but you have to look at it as if you're going to say, well, who's the biggest threat to global security? Well, you have to look at several factors, and those factors can but don't need to include who you think are the best people, right? Because China could be run by really bad people who are still smart enough not to cause World War III, right? You could have people who are who are impulsive and narcissistic and evil enough to not give a shit if they start World War III, but don't have the power and money to do so. I mean, by all accounts, Russia's economy is a hollowed out shell right now. Like they have certain sorts of reserves they can dip into, and but they're having a really hard time just recruiting people to go to the front line in the first place. And I mean, the Russia's economy is smaller than Canada's to begin with. It was smaller than Canada's. And Russia did not expect Ukraine to be able to put up the fight it did before the international community stepped in. And now that the international community has stepped in, I don't think Putin was expecting the international community to continue helping Ukraine as much as they did once Trump decided to stop helping Ukraine. I think that Putin, didn't think it was going to be nearly as hard as it was to begin with. And B, once he realized, okay, well, we're not just rolling over right into Kyiv like we thought we were going to, but the only reason we're having trouble is because the United States still supports Ukraine. If Trump stops supporting Ukraine, then it'll be easy. So it wasn't as easy as he thought it was in the first place. And now it's not nearly as easy to mop up what's left of Ukraine now that the United States isn't supporting Ukraine anymore. So I think that Russia is on very, very shaky ground, both economically and in terms of political stability, because like you'll never hear this from any kind of Russian media outlet. There's a few channels I follow on YouTube where people within Russia actually put up they upload videos of the sort of propaganda news channels like the Russian equivalent of Fox News within Russia, and then translate it, and then they put it up on YouTube. And it's terrifying. It's fucking terrifying. But like you'll never hear this from Russia because they have to maintain that strongman presence. Like they never lost their touch for propaganda just because the Soviet Union collapsed. But they are really suffering economically. And they are they're staring down the barrel of serious political instability at home. No one in Russia seems to want to fight this war anymore. Like actual support for the war, not the polls that Putin puts out, but actual support for the war on the ground has tanked. No one on the ground in Russia wants to be sent to the front lines anymore. So they're looking at a seriously politically unstable position at home, and they are economically ruined. Essentially, like you've got a few people running the country that Putin might be a trillionaire for all anybody knows, but you have a few really, really wealthy individuals at the top of Russia, but Russia itself is basically broke. So you might have the willingness to start World War III, but they don't really have the ability anymore, right? Right now, what Russia seems to be most concerned with is saving face for how much trouble they're having with little Ukraine, right? And getting their guys taken out by $100 drones taking out tanks that'll take that'll cost them $500 million to replace, right? So you have people like China who have the ability to be a serious global threat, but they're too smart to start World War III. They understand the ramifications for their own country if they start World War III. Like every single member of the CCP has an engineering degree in China. So these might not be good people, but they're smart people. And then you have people in Russia who might be dumb enough to start World War III. They might be impulsive enough or arrogant enough to start World War III, but they don't have the resources to do it. The only country on earth that is led by people who are impulsive, unintelligent, narcissistic, arrogant, and morally bankrupt enough to do something that could trigger a serious global incident and have the resources to do so is the United States, right? Like, think if I think to myself, what wouldn't Trump do to just not have to back up on some insane thing he said? Nothing. I don't think there's anything Trump wouldn't do if he thought that it would be politically expedient or make people like him or make people think he was a real man or enrich him as an individual. I don't think there's anything he wouldn't do. And I don't think there's anything he wouldn't do because I don't think there's anything that I don't think that he's smart enough to realize the actual potential ramifications of his actions. And even if he does, he's not a good person. He's not going to actually care about those things. It's a perfect storm right now. And what I think is going to be really interesting is in the next few years, especially if they manage to mess with the midterms, because no president has ever been able to actually stop an election from happening in the United States just because they didn't want it to happen. No president has ever really even tried to do that, let alone succeeded. So I think that would be a major tipping point for the international community to start treating the United States the way they treat other global threats to other threats to global security, right? Because if it's Israel, if it's Russia, if it's China, I mean, you could argue that the international community isn't taking nearly as much action as they should be on those countries, but they take action on them. They publicly and unequivocally denounce them. They cut diplomatic ties with them. They close their embassies. They sanction them economically. They don't allow people from those countries to travel. They cancel their visas so they can't go to certain countries. That's what I think is going to start happening to the United States because it's really not happening now. Everybody's still kind of tiptoeing around the United States. And I think all that needs to happen is for them to be insulated against the explosion that will occur from Donald Trump as soon as it actually happens. As soon as the rest of the world starts saying, you know what? You are just as much of a threat to our economic and military security as Russia. So we're going to start treating you like Russia. We're going to start sanctioning the United States. We're going to close our embassies in the United States. We're going to decouple
Sell
the
U.S. bonds.
Yeah, we're going to decouple the U.S. dollar from global securities and like once that starts happening, that's when shit's really going to jump off. But I think everybody on Earth has just kind of been trying just not to trying to like tiptoe around it and kind of maintain their moral positions by not throwing themselves in completely with what Trump is doing. And they'll criticize like things he says specifically and be like, well, that wasn't a very presidential thing to say. That, oh, like, I mean, what he said recently about the soldiers in Afghanistan. He said that, oh, we've never needed NATO. We've never needed NATO. They've never done anything for us. The only country that's ever invoked Chapter
Article 5.
5 or 7. Yeah, Article 5 is the United States. And British troops died.
An attack on one is an attack on all.
Yeah.
Therefore, all the other NATO members should come with us to Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And
so Donald Trump saying that, like, that really pissed off a lot of people in Britain and Canada to the point where they were actually willing to say something specifically about that statement, that, hey, you shouldn't be saying things like that, because we had a lot of people who died in Afghanistan fighting far from the front lines, as you called it. And by the way, the fact that he doesn't even know that that Canadians and British soldiers died in Afghanistan, the fact that he has demonstrated that little of understanding about the Afghanistan operation, should put to bed any doubt about any doubt that anyone had that the withdrawal would have gone better with Trump in charge, because he doesn't even seem to know what happened in Afghanistan.
He's
So
just a
it,
4D chess playing genius,
of
and you
course,
have
of
Trump
course.
derangement syndrome.
So, like, I think that's really the next big question is, I think everyone in the international community recognizes the United States as the biggest threat to global security right now, but they're not treating the United States like they treat other countries that are threats to global security. They're not willing to sanction the United States or file the International Criminal Court isn't putting arrest warrants out for Stephen Miller for crimes against humanity, right? That hasn't started happening yet. But I think at a certain point
It
you
could
have
have
to.
happened if the Greenland thing had gone somewhat differently. If Trump, in a late night Adderall fueled truth social haze, had ordered an occupation of the capital of Greenland by U.S. Paratroops dropping out of the sky after sonic booming uh, the capital and taking it over militarily, that could have, like, oh, dude, the U.S. could just kick the ass of any other country. Motherfucker, do you understand that you don't need that many nuclear weapons to basically end the world? Yeah, so the U.S. has got, I don't know, I'm going to make up a number, 10 times as many nukes, 100 times as many nukes as France and the UK. Cool. The UK number of nukes and the France number of nukes is more than sufficient to completely and utterly change life on this planet, and maybe even wipe out human civilization if the modeling for the things like nuclear winter prove to be true, which is untested so far. Long may it remain. I mean,
Well,
the law of unintended consequences is would go berserk there. Okay, troops land in Nook. Great. The UK sails a destroyer out. The U.S. Navy blockades Greenland. The British destroyer refuses to back down. The U.S. aircraft carrier sinks the British destroyer. And now we're off to the races. From one late night phone call over basically this penis-sized augmenting device known as taking over Greenland to the Third World War. It's no different from Archduke Ferdinand getting shot in Sarajevo by one tiny little bullet.
yeah.
That's
Well, I mean,
all it needed.
for context, in 1960, I want to say it was 1960 something. I think it was 1960. In 1960, the United States already had enough nuclear weapons to destroy the world 4 times over, every country on Earth. The Soviet Union reportedly had enough nuclear weapons to destroy the world 10 times over. And that was in the 1960s. Right, that was before Britain became a nuclear power and France became a nuclear power. And I want to say India is a nuclear power. Um, like there's that was in the 60s that we already had enough nuclear weapons, and there's all kinds of reasons why they claim to need that many. Basically, it's like our countermeasure strategy is to fire everything we have because we need to fire enough nukes. You know, if Russia fires nukes, then we need to fire enough nukes that even if Russia shoots down 80% of them, Russia's still wiped off the face of the earth. All right, that's why they claim they need that many. But yeah, you're right. It only takes one, and this is one of those things that makes Trump so dangerous. And the Republicans will pass this off as a good thing. They like the idea, like it's Dwight Eisenhower's brinkmanship policy on steroids, right? It's make sure you're always the craziest guy in the fight, right? Make sure that everyone who you come up against knows that you're willing to go further than they are. That's essentially what they sort of pitch as they pitch as like a benefit of Trump, not a flaw, right? But that impulsiveness, that sense, that complete lack of foresight or self-awareness or willingness to hear anything he doesn't want to hear from anybody he doesn't like I say, he's the guy who will never swerve in a game of chicken, and he'll make every situation, regardless of the stakes, a game of chicken. So
Yeah.
if you've got something like the Cuban Missile Crisis happening, and you've got a Soviet sub headed towards that blockade of U.S. ships, and their play is to say, if you come any closer, then we're going to board you for inspection, knowing for a fact that the Soviet sub is never going to let that happen, because even if they did, they'd be executed for allowing it, right? That they're not going to allow you to board the vessel. That their orders are to return fire with nuclear weapons if they're fired upon. If you have that sub going towards that blockade, and you've got Trump in charge of the U.S. Navy instead of JFK, what happens?
The world ends in the 1960s.
Yeah, I really do
Well,
think so,
at least
because
that the world does end, the white Christian nationalists who've been masturbating about the idea of revelations coming true will finally have their their day. Will finally have their day. They'll finally have what they want. I mean, I'm skittering off topic. I apologize, but it's important to recognize what a large percentage of Trump's base is actually hoping for World War III. They're hoping for World War III, ideally starting in the Middle East, as the Book of Revelations says it will, but they'll take it. They'll take any kind of World War III, because then Jesus comes back and the righteous get promoted, and the evil get thrown into a pit of burning fire for, what is it, 100,000 years or something like that. And then we'll all be then all the elect will be happy ever after. So they'll finally have what they've been hoping for.
yeah, I mean, it's the elephant in the room. Like the fact that everyone knows that Trump's not going to be around much longer, but it's not just about Trump, and it has been for a long time, because now the rest of the world knows that not only do they have to deal with Trump, they have to deal with the American electorate. They can't trust The rest of the world can't trust the American electorate anymore, because why would you, like, even if a Democrat wins the next election, a center right, sort of small c conservative Joe Biden figure who's refreshingly boring, right? Like Joe Biden was, right? Even if a Democrat wins next, why would anyone on earth want to make a deal with that president, knowing that in the next election, the American electorate could bring another Trump in there, somebody just as bad or even worse than Donald Trump, who's going to tear it all up?
Well, in the immortal words of George W. Bush, "Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me, you can't get fooled again." I mean, maybe one Donald Trump, maybe, but two Donald Trumps. There's no country on earth that's going to be betting on the intelligence
No,
of the American electorate at this point.
no.
So
I mean, it's just the damage that's already been done would take decades to repair if it started now, if the process started now. I mean, the United States has basically ended the Five Eyes, the Five Eyes intelligence cooperation that's existed since World War II.
yeah, they were leaking stuff to the Russians. as proven
Well,
definitively by the French.
yeah, I mean, the United States' most important ally and the closest intelligence relationship in the world, stopped sharing intelligence with the United States about what was going on in the Caribbean because they didn't want to aid and abet war crimes. Like that, the United States, they're talking about allowing Grok AI to be integrated into Pentagon operations.
Yep. Yep.
What
I've
what
confirmed that. I've confirmed that with somebody I know who's
Yeah. What
involved with
country
that.
on earth, China has a hacker army of reportedly 100,000 people dedicated to cyber warfare. The extent to which they must have been licking their lips at that kind of vulnerability in the Pentagon's tech operation. Like, what country would share intelligence with the United States knowing that Grok AI is integrated into their most sensitive security? Like,
Elon's a genius, Tyson. Elon's a genius, and he'll protect us all. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to call this off. I strongly recommend that you go follow Tyson on TikTok and on Instagram. He's the Warrior Philosopher. Is that right? Is that your handle
yeah,
there?
on TikTok it's the Warrior Philosopher, all one word, and then on Instagram it's the Warrior Philosopher IG, so the Warrior Philosopher Instagram. Yeah, I mean, always a pleasure. Always fun, always interesting, and looking forward to coming back for a lighter topic of Alberta separatism.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think that's a really important topic because it's a lot about the disinformation and misinformation and these bot armies and the funding that's being used to promote MAGA in uh, not incentives, MAGA projects all over the world, including next door neighbors and most important trading allies and former military allies, and yeah, uh, so that'll be a really interesting discussion. I can't wait for it. All right, Tyson, take care.
All
Thanks
right,
so much.
thank you.